I used to think the sound of crystal glasses clinking meant joy, celebration, something worth remembering. But that night, at my father's 70th birthday party, it became the sound of something breaking. Not glass. Me? We were at my parents' estate in upstate New York. White columns, manicured lawns, chandeliers hanging in rooms bigger than my entire apartment. Everything picture perfect. And still, I almost didn't come. But my 5-year-old son, Noah, he begged me. He'd never met them before. My parents, his grandparents, he'd only seen their faces in old photos, frozen smiles in expensive frames. "Please, Mommy," he said, gripping his little backpack. "I want to meet Grandpa and Grandma." So we came. One weekend, one party, one chance to show them that Noah was a part of this family, whether they liked it or not. At first, things felt tense, but civil. My mother gave us a tour of the house like we were guests at some country club. My father barely looked at me, but he did shake Noah's hand stiffly like he was meeting a business associate, not his own grandson. And then came the toast. All the guests were gathered in the grand dining hall. Laughter, small talk, champagne bubbling in crystal flutes. Noah was sitting beside me wearing the little bow tie he picked out himself. He was so proud, so excited. My father stood at the head of the table, lifted his glass. And with that cold, polished smile he's perfected his entire life, he said, "Tonight marks the beginning of a new chapter. One where the family bloodline is finally pure again." The room went silent. My stomach dropped. I looked at him and something in his eyes made my skin crawl. Then it happened. Noah coughed. Once, twice, then violently. He clutched his stomach and started vomiting, his tiny body shaking, eyes wide with confusion and terror. I jumped up, screaming his name. He collapsed in my arms. His face was pale, lips turning blue. People gasped. Someone dropped a glass. And all I could do was scream for help. Because my son, my baby, was dying in my arms. And somewhere in that perfect, polished room, someone knew why. At the hospital, everything was chaos. Noah was being rushed into emergency care, his little body hooked up to machines that beeped like warnings I didn't know how to answer. My hands were stained with his vomit, my chest tight, shaking. But inside my mind, another part of me was screaming something different. I should have known. I did know, because this wasn't the first time my parents had tried to erase someone I loved. When I married Aaron, a kind, brilliant man who just happened to be black, my parents cut me off. "No congratulations. No, we're happy for you. Just one phone call. Short. Final. You made your choice, Ava," my father said. "And now, you'll live with it." And I did. Aaron and I built our own life, our own family, and for 5 years we were happy, until a drunk driver stole him from us. 2 years ago, just like that. I called them after the funeral, not to ask for anything, just to tell them they had a grandson. They hung up. They refused to even speak Noah's name, so when the invitation came for my father's 70th birthday, I should have burned it. But they said they wanted to reconnect, said they'd changed, said Noah should know his roots, and somewhere deep down in that desperate part of me that still wanted parents. I believed them. I thought maybe time had softened them. I thought maybe grief had opened a door that hate had slammed shut. I thought wrong. The moment we stepped into that house, it was clear nothing had changed. My mother's smile was still sharp enough to cut glass. My father spoke to me like I was an employee who had disappointed him years ago and never recovered. And every time they looked at Noah, I saw something cold flicker behind their eyes, something dangerous. But I ignored it. Because I wanted peace. Because I wanted Noah to have a family. Because I didn't want to believe they were still capable of that kind of hate. And then, Celeste showed up. I hadn't seen my sister in almost 4 years. She looked tired, pale, but fierce. She walked into the house like she didn't care if she was welcome or not. And knowing our parents, she wasn't. We locked eyes across the living room. And for the first time in a long time, I saw someone who remembered the same ghosts I did. She gave me a quick nod. No words, just that look that said I know. We never talked much growing up. I was the older one, always trying to keep the peace. Celeste was the rebel, the fighter, the one who walked away first. Now I understood why. Maybe she came because she knew. Maybe she sensed something was going to happen. Or maybe she just wanted to see if our parents were still the monsters we remembered. And when Noah collapsed at that table, when his tiny body hit the floor, Celeste was the only one who moved before I did. She pushed through the crowd, dropped to her knees beside me, and whispered, "Ava, what did they do?" And I didn't have an answer. Not yet. But I was going to find out. And this time, I wasn't going to stay quiet. The waiting room felt like a prison made of silence and fluorescent lights. I sat there holding Noah's tiny shoes in my lap, still stained from the party. The smell of champagne and panic clung to me like smoke. When the ER doctor finally came out, his face was tight. "Serious? Are you the mother?" he asked. I nodded. "We've stabilized him for now," he said. "But we need to talk about what we found." My heart stopped. He looked me dead in the eyes. "Your son had traces of a substance called denatonium benzoate. It's one of the most bitter compounds known to exist. Extremely rare in this form. But deliberate." I blinked, confused. "You're saying he was poisoned?" The doctor hesitated, then gave a small, grim nod. "It wasn't an accident. This wasn't something he could have just picked up. It had to be ingested recently." I felt my entire body go cold. Noah had only eaten from the buffet. Same food as everyone else. Except my drink. The champagne. I hadn't touched it. At the table, while I was adjusting Noah's napkin, he'd reached for my glass. I'd smiled and thought one tiny sip won't hurt. But it had. It nearly killed him. My hand started shaking. I looked at the doctor. "Are you saying I was the target? We can't be sure yet," he said. "But from the concentration in the wine and the dose..." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. It wasn't meant for Noah. It was meant for me. The toast, that speech my father gave. The family bloodline will finally be pure again. It wasn't symbolic. It wasn't dramatic. It was a warning. And I hadn't heard it in time. I stumbled out of the room past nurses and machines and beeping monitors. I needed air. I needed to breathe. But all I could see was Noah's face, pale, unconscious, hooked up to wires, paying the price for my mistake. Celeste caught up to me near the exit. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice low but urgent. "What did they say?" "They tried to poison me," I whispered. "But Noah..." He drank from my glass. Celeste went still. Her jaw clenched, her eyes filled with something between fury and horror. She grabbed my arm. "Ava, we have to go to the police." And that's when it hit me. I'd brought my child into a lion's den. And now, there was no going back. This wasn't just some family falling out. This was something darker. Calculated, cruel, and criminal. I didn't even remember driving back to the hospital parking lot. All I knew was that I needed answers. Not from the doctors, not from the police. From them. My parents were sitting in the waiting area when I walked in like they belonged there. Like nothing had happened. My mother was flipping through a magazine. My father was scrolling through his phone. Two people waiting for a flight. Not for news about their dying grandson. When she saw me, my mother smiled. That same polite, soulless smile she used on country club guests. "Ava," she said softly. "You look exhausted." I froze. "What did you do?" She blinked, pretending confusion. "What are you talking about? You know exactly what I'm talking about," I snapped. "The champagne, the toast, the poison. Noah is fighting for his life because of you." Her expression didn't change. If anything, she looked bored. You should have died, not the boy, she said quietly. Then she leaned forward. But I guess nature makes its own corrections. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. It wasn't just cruelty. It was belief. She meant it. I turned to my father. Is that how you both see him? A mistake? A correction? He met my eyes, calm, composed. You brought shame to this family, he said. Your child is not a Morgan. He's a stain we tried to erase. My whole body shook. I took a step closer. You're monsters, he shrugged. We're realists. You made your choice when you married that man. Don't act surprised now that the consequences have arrived. My voice cracked. He was your son-in-law. Noah is your blood. My father smirked. Not enough of it. Behind me, I heard a soft click. A faint sound like a phone starting to record. Celeste was standing by the doorway. She didn't move, didn't speak, but her phone was pointed right at them. My mother noticed. Her face turned white. Celeste, she said sharply. Put that away. But Celeste didn't flinch. She stepped into the room, her voice shaking but steady. No, she said. You don't get to hide this time. My father stood up. Careful, young lady. You're playing with fire. Celeste took one more step forward. I've been burned by you my whole life, she said. I'm done pretending. My mother tried to stand, but I blocked her path. She looked at me with pure disgust. You think anyone will believe you? You've always been the emotional one. The unstable one. Maybe I said. But now, we have proof. Celeste's phone light glowed red in her hand, still recording. Their words, their hate, their confession. It was all there. For the first time in my life, I saw fear in my father's eyes. Not guilt, not shame, just the realization that the mask had finally cracked. And I swore to myself I wasn't stopping this time, not until every single truth they buried was brought into the light. The moment Celeste hit stop on her phone, I turned and walked straight out of the hospital. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just called 911. My son was poisoned, I told the dispatcher. I believe my parents did it, and I have a recording that proves it. The officer who arrived didn't look surprised. Maybe he'd dealt with enough wealthy families to know that evil doesn't always come with a mugshot. But the moment my parents saw the patrol car, they switched, like flipping a switch. Suddenly, they weren't the cold, cruel monsters we'd just confronted. They were the victims. My daughter is not well. My mother told the officer, her voice trembling. She's been unstable for years, ever since her husband died. She's paranoid, my father added. She makes things up when she's overwhelmed. I could feel the ground shifting, slowly, dangerously. And then came the worst part. Child Protective Services showed up. A woman with a clipboard and a carefully neutral expression. We're just doing a wellness check, she said. Due to an anonymous tip. Anonymous. Sure, she pulled me aside, speaking softly like I was a trauma victim. We've been told you were recently hospitalized for psychological reasons. Is that correct? I blinked. That was 2 years ago. After my husband died, I went to grief counseling. It was supervised voluntary. I was never a danger to anyone. She nodded slowly, writing something down. And have you ever harmed your son? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. You think I did this? I asked, my voice cracking. Ma'am, we're not accusing... Yes, you are, I snapped. You think I poisoned my own child for attention? She said nothing, but in her silence, I heard exactly what she believed. I felt my knees start to buckle. It was happening. They were turning this against me. They weren't just trying to get away with it. They were trying to erase me. Again. And for a moment, I honestly thought they'd win, until Celeste stepped in. She didn't say a word. She just walked over, handed the phone to the detective, and pressed play. My mother's voice came through, first clear as glass. You should have died, not the boy. But I guess nature makes its own corrections. Then my father. Your child is not a Morgan. He's a stain we tried to erase. The room went still. The The CPS worker stopped writing. The officer raised his eyebrows and took the phone. "Can you send this to me?" he asked Celeste. She nodded. And just like that, the tide turned. Because they could say I was emotional. They could say I was unstable. But they couldn't say that wasn't their voice. They couldn't explain that recording away. For the first time, someone believed me. And I realized this wasn't just about saving Noah anymore. This was about saving the truth. Before they buried that, too, I used to think the courtroom was a place where the truth would speak for itself. It's not. It's a war zone just dressed in suits and silence. The grand jury moved quickly. With Celeste's recording and Noah's medical report, it was enough. My parents were indicted on multiple charges: attempted murder, child endangerment, conspiracy. But I knew that was just the beginning, because they weren't going to go down without a fight, and they had the money to hire someone dangerous. Their lawyer, Franklin Chase, had the kind of resume that made headlines. He once got a corrupt mayor acquitted with nothing but charm and fake tears. Now, he stood in front of the jury, smiling like this was all some unfortunate misunderstanding. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said smoothly, "this was a tragedy, but not a crime. A child drank something he wasn't supposed to. It was an accident. Nothing more." He painted me as the unwell daughter with a personal vendetta. He brought up my therapy. My grief! He even questioned whether the recording could be taken out of context. Every word was a knife sharpened to gut me slowly. When it was my turn to take the stand, my legs barely worked. My hands trembled as I took the oath. But when I looked out at those 12 strangers, I wasn't just a grieving mother. I was the only voice Noah had. I told them everything. I talked about marrying Aaron, about how my parents cut me off, how they never visited the hospital after his crash, how they never sent a single birthday card to their grandson. I told them about the looks, the comments, the long, slow way they turned their backs on me and everything I loved. I didn't cry, I didn't scream. I spoke the way I always wished they had, with honesty and clarity. When I said they didn't see my son as family, they saw him as a mistake several jurors turned away. But it wasn't until Celeste took the stand that the courtroom truly froze. She didn't hold back. "My parents used the word impurity," she said, her voice low but sharp. "They said Ava's child was a blemish on the legacy. They said it would be better if he wasn't around." She paused. "They meant to kill her, but the child drank it first. And they didn't care." Chase tried to object. He said Celeste had always been the rebel, that she had her own issues with the family, that maybe she was projecting. But the jury didn't look convinced, because truth, real, raw, unforgiving truth, has a weight to it. You feel it in your chest. And in that moment, I saw them finally feel it. It didn't matter how expensive my parents' suits were, or how polished their lies sounded, because sitting behind that defense table, they didn't look like victims anymore. They looked like exactly what they were. People who tried to bury the truth and got caught holding the shovel. The courtroom was silent when Gerald Miller took the stand. He looked every bit the respected man he pretended to be. Tailored suit, silver cufflinks, that calm, commanding voice he always used to remind us we were beneath him. He didn't even glance at me as he raised his hand for the oath, and when the defense began, he played his role perfectly. He was just a grandfather, shocked, devastated, misunderstood. He said he loved all his grandchildren equally. But it all shifted when the prosecution took over. Mr. Miller, the prosecutor, asked, "Did you say the words, 'Finally, the family bloodline will be pure again,' during your birthday toast?" Gerald didn't flinch. He leaned back and gave a small smirk. "I did," he said. Gasps echoed from the back of the room. But he continued, it was symbolic. A joke. "You know, family humor." The prosecutor stepped closer. "Is poisoning your daughter also part of your sense of humor?" Gerald's smile faltered for a split second. "I didn't poison anyone, but you made a toast implying that your own grandson didn't belong." "I was referring to legacy," he said quickly. "Tradition. It had nothing to do with race or the child. The prosecutor's voice sharpened. Then why refer to bloodlines? Gerald paused too long. And in that pause, the mask started to slip. From the gallery, I saw jurors shift uncomfortably. They felt it too. Then it was Vivian's turn. She was already sweating when she sat down. Her lipstick smudged, her fingers twitching. It didn't take long before the pressure cracked her. She tried to deflect, tried to paint me as unstable. Said Celeste twisted her words. But then the prosecutor asked, "Did you ever say he should have never existed?" In reference to your grandson Vivian froze. You could see it, she wanted to lie. But something inside her snapped. She slammed her hand on the table and shouted, "Because he shouldn't have." The entire courtroom gasped. Even the judge looked stunned. Vivian's voice rose shrill, raw, unfiltered. "He destroyed everything. Ava brought that child into this family to punish us, to embarrass us." She turned to me with pure hatred in her eyes. "He was never one of us. Never." The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. Their lawyer tried to intervene, but it was too late. In that single moment, every illusion they built, every charity gala, every polished interview, every smiling family photo, it all crumbled. There they were, not community leaders, not misunderstood grandparents, but cold, calculated bigots masquerading as philanthropists. And for the first time in my life, they weren't untouchable anymore. It took the jury less than 4 hours. I sat in that courtroom, hands clenched in my lap, barely breathing. When the bailiff said, "All rise," my knees nearly gave out. Gerald and Vivian were brought in, both in gray suits, both still clinging to that last shred of dignity. They looked like they thought they'd walk out of there. They didn't. The foreman stood, paper shaking in his hands. In the case of the state versus Gerald and Vivian Miller, on the count of attempted murder, guilty. On the count of child endangerment, guilty. On the count of committing a hate crime, guilty. The courtroom erupted in gasps. Vivian let out a sharp choking sound somewhere between a cry and a scream. Gerald didn't move, didn't blink, just stared straight ahead, stone-faced. The judge's voice cut through the noise. "I find your actions deliberate, cruel, and irredeemable. You violated the most sacred trust protecting a child. Your sentence is 35 years, Mr. Miller, and 30 years, Mrs. Miller." Celeste grabbed my hand. I didn't even realize I'd been shaking. It was over, at least the part with them. The rest would take time. Noah's recovery wasn't quick. He spent weeks in the hospital, then months in therapy. He had night terrors, panic attacks. He flinched at sudden movements. He didn't want to be in rooms with closed doors. Some days he wouldn't even speak. But slowly, day by day, he started to come back to me. His therapist was gentle, patient. They worked on rebuilding safety, trust, joy, and Celeste. She never left our side. We started cooking together again like we did as kids. Late night talks, laughter, tears. I realized I hadn't just lost my parents, I'd found my sister again. One night I sat down and started writing. Not for anyone else, just to remember, but the pages poured out of me like a dam breaking, the trauma, the silence, the rage, the truth. Eventually, it became a book. I titled it, "The Poison They Called Love." It helped cover Noah's therapy, the medical bills, the rebuilding. It helped strangers understand what we survived. But more than that, it gave me power over a story that almost killed us, because my parents tried to define our worth, tried to erase us quietly behind champagne flutes and silver spoons. Instead, the world watched them fall. And me, I walked out of that courtroom holding my son's hand. Not broken, but healing. It's been 2 years, and somehow we've built a new life. Not perfect, not polished, but real. We moved far away from everything, far from courtrooms, sirens, marble floors, and poisoned champagne. Now we live in a small cabin by the river. In the mornings, I make pancakes while Noah runs outside. barefoot chasing dragonflies with Celeste's daughter Layla. The air smells like pine and sunlight. It's quiet here. The kind of quiet that doesn't feel empty. It feels earned. Noah still has scars. Some you can see, some you can't. But he's stronger now. He sleeps through the night. He laughs with his whole chest again. And sometimes he even sings. One afternoon, he came running up the porch steps with a piece of paper in his hand. "Mommy, look," he said. It was a drawing, stick figures all holding hands. Me, him, Celeste, and Layla standing under a bright yellow sun. And right above it in crayon letters he'd written, "This is my real family now." I didn't cry. Not right away. I just pulled him into my arms and held him close. Because in that moment, everything finally made sense. They tried to erase him, tried to erase us. But instead, he became the reason I found myself. He made me fight. He made me speak. He made me whole again. And now we're free. If you've made it this far into the story, thank you. If it moved you or made you think about family truth or healing, tell me what parts stayed with you the most. Leave a comment below. I read everyone. And if you're new here, don't forget, our channel drops powerful true stories like this every single day. Subscribe so you never miss what comes next. Because sometimes the darkest stories shine the brightest light.